The bell above the store door hadn't rung in 3 days. Scarlett Winters stood behind the counter, watching dust motes drift through the shaft of morning light, counting what remained on the shelves. 2 sacks of flour, 1 of sugar, half a barrel of salt pork that was starting to turn. The ledger in front of her showed more red ink than black. Outside, Red Mesa was dying. She could hear it in the silence where hammers used to ring at the smithy, see it in the boarded windows of the hotel across the street. The town that once boasted 300 souls now held 47, if you counted old Pete, who spent his days talking to shadows in the saloon. The door creaked open. Not the bell. That had stopped working weeks ago. Martha Henley shuffled in, her twin boys clutching her skirts. 8 years old and already too thin. "Morning, Scar." Martha's voice was hoarse. Everyone's was these days, from the dust and the rationing of water. "Martha," Scarlett reached for the small parcel she'd set aside. "This is the last of the oats. Cook it thin, make it stretch." Martha's hands shook as she took it. "How much do I—" "We'll settle accounts when the supply wagon comes." They both knew what that meant. The wagon was 17 days overdue. The last letter from the territorial office, delivered by a passing rider, had been brief. Due to ongoing hostilities, communities must provide for their own defense and sustenance. God be with you. God had left Red Mesa about the same time as the sheriff. Scarlett watched Martha leave, then turned back to her ledger. 10 days. That's what they had if she cut rations again. The main well had gone dry 2 weeks back. The shallow one was pulling up more mud than water. Come noon, she'd have to call another meeting, tell folks what they already knew but didn't want to hear. A shadow fell across the doorway. The man stood exactly where prudent men stood, far enough back that he wasn't threatening, close enough to be heard. 20 feet. It was an old distance, from the days when her father ran the store and taught her to read men's intentions in their posture. This one wore leather gone soft with age and sweat, decorated with beadwork she didn't recognize. No weapons visible, but that meant nothing. His face was weathered dark, age impossible to tell. Could be 30, could be 50. His eyes held that particular stillness she'd seen in men who'd learned patience from the desert itself. "Store's closed to strangers," she called out, hand moving to the shotgun beneath the counter. "Not here to buy." His voice carried the careful pronunciation of someone speaking a second language. "Here to offer. We got nothing to trade. Not trade, survival." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Scarlett stepped out from behind the counter, shotgun visible but not raised. The man noted it with a slight nod, approving her caution. "Speak your piece and move on. Your wells fail. Your wagons don't come. Winter walks closer each day." He gestured toward the empty street. "My people know how to live when the earth gives nothing. Join us. Learn." The laugh burst out before she could stop it. Part exhaustion, part disbelief, part the absurdity of it all. "Join you. Abandon everything we've built? Not abandon. Adapt. And become what? Charity cases? Servants?" Something shifted in his expression. Not anger, exactly. Disappointment, maybe. "You think the desert cares about your pride? You think hunger asks permission? We've managed this long." "Have you?" He looked pointedly at the boarded windows, the empty street. "How many gone since spring? How many more before snow?" Heat rose in her cheeks. "That's our business." "Yes, it is." He took a step back, the interview clearly ending. "When you bury the next child, remember, I offered another way. Get out." He was already turning. 3 riders waited on the rise beyond town, had been there all along. She hadn't noticed them until now, which told her something about how tired she was, how careless she'd become. "One more thing," he said without looking back. "Winter remembers every laugh of pride, every one." The riders wheeled their horses and were gone, leaving only dust and the echo of hoofbeats. Scarlett stood in the doorway, shotgun heavy in her hands, watching them disappear into the heat shimmer. Behind her, Doc Henley's cough rattled from the clinic. The consumption was getting worse. Without proper medicine, without clean water to ease his fever, he'd be gone before the month was out. Then they'd have no doctor at all. She went back inside, set the shotgun in its place, and stared at the ledger. The numbers hadn't changed. They never did, no matter how long she looked at them. 10 days. The meeting would have to be called. Decisions would have to be made. But first, she needed to check the shallow well again. See if Jakob the blacksmith could rig something to dig it deeper. He was half blind now, hands shaking with age, but he was all they had. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth harder, pulling the last moisture from the air. In the distance, a buzzard circled something that had given up the fight. Scarlett closed the ledger and prepared to face another day of managing death by degrees. The stranger's words echoed in her mind, unwanted but persistent. When you bury the next child. She shook her head, angry at herself for even considering it. Red Mesa was their home. Her father had built this store with his own hands, had served this community for 20 years until the fever took him last winter. She wouldn't abandon his legacy to follow some savage into the wilderness, no matter how bad things got. Pride. He'd called it pride. Maybe it was. But sometimes pride was all you had left when everything else had been stripped away. Sometimes it was the only thing separating you from the animals, from becoming just another scavenger in the dust. She'd call the meeting. They'd find a way. They always had before. The desert stretched endlessly beyond the town's borders, patient and pitiless. Somewhere out there, 3 riders and their spokesman continued on their way, carrying with them an offer she'd laughed at. Winter was coming. That much was certain. Whether any of them would live to see spring, that was the question that kept her awake at night, counting sacks of flour and watching the water level drop. 10 days. The bell above the door remained silent, broken like so many other things in Red Mesa. But the store stayed open, because closing it would be admitting defeat. And Scarlett Winters, daughter of Samuel Winters, keeper of the last general store in a dying town, wasn't ready to admit that yet, even if the numbers in the ledger already had. The stranger returned at dawn, alone this time. Scarlett had been up all night, sitting with the Garrett boy whose fever wouldn't break. Doc Henley was too weak to leave his bed, reduced to whispering instructions while she tried to follow them. The boy lived, barely. When she stumbled out of the clinic into the pale morning light, the man was there, sitting cross-legged in the dust 20 feet from her door. Same careful distance, same patient stillness. "You!" The word came out cracked and bitter. "Come to gloat?" He studied her face, the hollow eyes, the trembling hands, the blood on her apron from where the boy had thrashed in his delirium. "Come to offer again?" The answer's still no. "Is it?" He rose in one fluid motion, somehow making it look effortless despite what must be middle age. "The boy lives?" "No thanks to you." "No, thanks to you. But next time?" She didn't answer. Couldn't. They'd used the last of the laudanum, the last of the clean bandages. If another child fell sick, "My name is Karuk." He said it like it mattered, like names could bridge the gulf between them. "I lead hunting parties for my people, scout for water, teach young ones to read the land. I don't care who you are. You should, because I could teach your young ones too, before hunger makes them too weak to learn." The laugh that escaped her this time was darker, edged with exhaustion. "Teach them what? How to abandon their homes? How to live like—" She bit back the word, but they both knew what she'd almost said. "Like survivors?" His voice held no anger, only that same quiet patience. "Yes, I could teach them that. We have our own ways. Your ways are killing you." The blunt truth of it hit like cold water. She wanted to rage at him, to defend her people's courage and determination. But young Thomas Garrett's fever-bright eyes were too fresh in her memory. "What would you have us do?" The question surprised her. She hadn't meant to ask it. "Pack up what little we have left and follow you into the wilderness? Become beggars at your fire?" "Not beggars, students." "There's a difference. One keeps you alive." A door slammed somewhere in town. Mrs. Patterson emerged from her house, saw them talking, and hurried back inside. By noon, everyone would know Scarlett had been speaking with one of them. The gossip would fly faster than telegraph wires. "You should go," she said. "People here don't take kindly to visitors. Your people are dying of pride." "Maybe, but it's our pride. Our choice." He tilted his head, studying her like she was a track in the dust he was trying to read. The woman who sat all night with a sick child? She makes choices? Or the daughter who won't dishonor her father's memory? The accuracy of it stung. "Don't presume to know me. I know drought. I know hunger. I know the look of someone counting days until the end." He gestured at the town around them. "How many days left?" "That's none of your—" "How many?" "10. The admission fell out before she could stop it. "Maybe 12 if we—" She shook her head. There was no point in finishing. If they what? If they found water in a desert that gave none? If supply wagons materialized from thin air? "My people camped 2 days north. White Rock Spring. You know it?" She nodded reluctantly. Everyone knew White Rock, though no one went there anymore. Not since the treaties had been broken and redrawn again. "We have water, food, medicine." He paused. "Pride feeds no one, but we don't demand you abandon it. Only that you learn what we know. Your customs, your God, your names. Keep them. But learn to live, or all you'll have left to be proud of is graves. And in return, survive first, obligations later." It was too good to be true. Had to be. Nothing came free in the desert. "Why? Why do you care what happens to Red Mesa?" For the first time, something like emotion crossed his weathered features. "Because I have seen too many towns become bones. Because the land is harsh enough without men adding to its cruelty. Because—" He seemed to weigh his words. "Because someone should have made this offer to others, before it was too late. The mission." She knew without asking that's what he meant. San Carlos, Fort Defiance, places where pride and policy had written tragedy in blood and sand. "I need time, to think, to talk to the others." "Time!" He almost smiled. "The one thing you don't have." He turned to go, then paused. "When I was young, my grandfather told me the desert teaches 2 lessons. How to bend and how to break. Most men never learn the difference." "Profound. Did he also teach you to make speeches to desperate women?" This time he did smile, just a slight lifting of the weathered lines around his eyes. "No. That I learned from watching desperate women refuse help they need." He walked away, and she let him. But this time she watched him go with different eyes. Noted the easy stride, the way he moved across the broken ground without disturbing a stone. A man who knew the land the way she knew her ledgers. Intimately, honestly, without romance or denial. Jakob the blacksmith emerged from his shop, squinting at her through his clouded eyes. "That one of them Indians, Miss Scarlet?" "Just a man, Jakob." Offering what?" She hesitated. Word would spread regardless, but how she framed it mattered. "A chance to learn. Maybe trade." "Trade what? We got nothing." "Maybe that's the point." The old man spat into the dust. "Your PA wouldn't truck with their kind." "My PA never watched children die of thirst." The harsh words hung between them. Jakob's face softened. "No, reckon he didn't." He shuffled back toward his shop, then turned. That savage say anything worth hearing? Scarlet thought of 10 days, of the Garrett boys' fever, of pride and survival, and the terrible arithmetic of rationing water drop by drop. "Maybe," she admitted. "Maybe he did." The sun climbed higher, beginning another day of relentless heat. In the clinic, Doc Henley coughed, a wet, rattling sound that spoke of time running out. At the well, women gathered with their buckets, pulling up more mud than water, their faces set in the grim determination of those who've forgotten how to hope. 10 days. Karuk's words echoed. Pride feeds no one. But pride was what had built Red Mesa, what had carved civilization from wilderness. Pride in honest work, in community, in the stubborn refusal to bow to the desert's demands. Could they keep that pride and still survive? Or would they, as the stranger predicted, have nothing left but graves to be proud of? She needed to think, needed to talk to Doc Henley, to Martha, to the others who still had enough fight left to have opinions. But underneath the need for counsel ran a darker current of knowledge. They were already past the point of good choices. All that remained now were the lesser evils, the compromises that might buy another day, another week, another chance to see spring. The stranger, Karuk, had offered a way. Not a pleasant way, not an easy way, but a way nonetheless. The question that gnawed at her as she walked back to the store wasn't whether they should take it. The question was whether they could afford not to. The white flag appeared at first light, carried by a man who knew how to announce himself properly to a town with more guns than hope. Scarlet watched from the store window as he approached, Older than Kuruk, silver threading through black hair worn long and loose. His horse was painted with symbols she didn't recognize, but the flag he carried was clear enough. Parley, not raid. By the time he reached the center of town, most of Red Mesa had gathered. Those who could walk, anyway. Women clutched children close. Men fingered weapons they had no ammunition for. Everyone waited. The rider dismounted with deliberate slowness, each movement calculated to appear non-threatening. When he spoke, his English was more fluent than Kuruk's, tinged with an accent that might have been Spanish or something older. "I am Standing Bear, war chief of the White Rock Band. I come to speak of life and death." "Speak then." Reverend Walsh stepped forward, still trying to assert authority he'd lost when the church collection plate stopped filling. "But no, we are Christian folk here, not given to heathen ways." Standing Bear's expression didn't change. "Your Christ walked in a desert too. Did he refuse water because pagans dug the well?" The Reverend's face reddened, but before he could respond, Scarlet moved past him. Someone had to be practical. "You're here about Kuruk's offer." "I'm here because winter comes, whether you believe in it or not." Standing Bear's dark eyes swept the crowd. "Kuruk tells me you have 10 days of food. I tell you now, you have less. Bodies burn hotter when they fight sickness. That boy who fevered 2 nights ago, he'll need more than your rationed portions to recover." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. How did he know about Thomas Garrett? "We watch," Standing Bear said simply, as if reading their thoughts. "Not to threaten, to count how many graves we'll need to dig come spring if pride wins over sense." "What exactly are you proposing?" Doc Henley's voice was weak but clear. Someone had carried him out on a chair, blanket wrapped around his thin shoulders despite the heat. Protection, teaching, survival. Standing Bear pulled a leather pouch from his belt, opened it to reveal dried meat, darker and richer looking than any jerky they'd seen. "This feeds a man for 3 days. Your women could learn to make it. Your men could learn to hunt what wanders where cattle fear to graze." "At what cost?" Scarlet kept her voice steady. "Learn our ways of water and food. Share labor when needed. Defend together if threatened." He paused. "And stop calling for soldiers to solve your Indian problem." The silence stretched taut. Everyone knew what he meant. 3 times in the past year, Red Mesa had petitioned for military intervention against hostile natives. 3 times they'd been ignored. "You're asking us to trust you," Martha Henley said, her boys pressed against her skirts. "After all that's happened, after Sand Creek, after Wounded Knee, after Camp Grant, after 100 betrayals both ways." Standing Bear's voice carried weight beyond his years. "Yes, I ask trust, because the alternative is watching your children starve while we watch ours do the same, all for the satisfaction of dying as enemies instead of living as neighbors. Living as equals." Jacob the blacksmith squinted through his failing eyes. "Or living as servants." "The desert serves no one and makes servants of all. We offer to teach you its terms. Your town remains yours, your customs yours. But you learn what we know, or you learn what the buzzards know. And if we refuse?" Standing Bear shrugged. "Then we watch from the hills as you bury your dead. Maybe say prayers to whatever spirits accept the stubborn. Maybe wonder if this could have ended differently." "This is blackmail," Reverend Walsh sputtered. "This is truth." Standing Bear mounted his horse with the same measured grace. "Truth is, you've been abandoned by your own people. Truth is, we know how to live where you're learning how to die. Truth is, your children's hunger won't care about the color of the hand that feeds them." He wheeled his horse, then paused. "Kuruk waits at White Rock Spring. Send word by noon tomorrow, yes or no. After that." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. The crowd watched him go, then erupted. Voices raised in anger, fear, desperate hope. Arguments broke out between those who saw betrayal and those who saw opportunity. Through it all, Scarlet noticed who stayed silent, the mothers counting days of food, the fathers who'd already sold their tools for grain, the young ones who'd never known Red Mesa in its glory days. "We should pray on it," Reverend Walsh declared. "Pray with what?" Old Sarah Miller's voice cut sharp. "Empty bellies don't make church bells ring louder. This is our home. This is our grave if we're not careful. back and forth it went, while the sun climbed and the day grew hotter and the water in the well dropped another inch. Scarlett slipped away from the crowd, needing space to think. She found Kuruk at the well. He sat in the shade of the broken windmill, patient as stone. No one had seen him arrive. When she approached, hand instinctively moving to her belt knife, he merely pointed at the well. "Listen," she did. Heard the bucket scrape bottom, the splash too shallow, the gurgle of air where water should be. 8 days, he said. Not 10. You were listening to Standing Bear's speech. I was counting your water hauls. 3 buckets this morning where yesterday gave 4. He stood, moved to the well's edge. May I? She nodded, curious despite herself. He produced a small stone from his pouch, dropped it down the shaft. The splash came too quick. Your well digger went straight down, easy, fast, wrong. He pointed northwest. Water flows under earth like over it. Follow the flow, find the source. Easy to say, easy to show. He walked 15 paces from the well, knelt, pressed his ear to the ground. A moment later he stood, walked another 10 paces, repeated the process. On the 3rd try he nodded. Here, dig here, angled toward the hills. More work, but water runs deeper, cleaner. How can you possibly know that? He pointed to a scraggly cottonwood 20 yards distant, its leaves still showing green despite the drought. Tree knows, birds know. A prairie dog chittered from a hole near the tree's base. He knows. Your people forgot how to listen. Our people built towns, railroads, civilization. Built them where water ran easy. Now it doesn't. He walked back to her, maintaining that careful distance. Standing Bear offered terms. Fair ones. According to you. According to survival. You think we want your town, your wooden boxes that trap heat, your wells that drink themselves dry? He shook his head. We want neighbors who know enough not to die badly, who might trade fairly, who might stand with us when other troubles come. Other troubles? His expression darkened. Railroad coming. Different bands, different ideas how to meet it. Some say fight, some say flee. Some say adapt. Better to face that with allies than enemies. The politics of it surprised her. She'd thought, but no, of course they had their own divisions, their own debates about change and tradition. Noon tomorrow, she said. Or morning after, if your talking runs long. We're patient. He started to leave, then turned back. The boy with fever. Willow bark tea, but not just any willow. The red stem that grows by running water, cools the blood without thinning it too much. Why tell me this? Because you stayed with him all night. Because you care more for lives than pride. A ghost of a smile. Because maybe you'll remember kindness when the voting comes. He was gone before she could respond, vanishing into the landscape like smoke. But his words lingered, practical and unsentimental as the desert itself. 8 days, not 10. The council would meet tonight. They'd argue until their throats were raw, quote scripture and law and tradition. But in the end, it would come down to the same brutal arithmetic that governed everything in Red Mesa now. How many days until the water ran out? How many mouths to feed? How many graves they could bear to dig? Standing Bear had called it truth. Kuruk called it survival. Scarlett, standing by a failing well under a merciless sun, called it the only choice they had left. The provisions arrived in the dead of night, silent as ghosts. Scarlett woke to find bundles on her store's back step, dried meat wrapped in clean cloth, cornmeal in leather pouches, seeds she didn't recognize, and medicine bark tied with sinew. No note, no demand for payment. Just food where none had been, placed carefully beyond the reach of creatures in dew. By morning, every household had received similar gifts. Even Reverend Walsh, who'd spent half the night denouncing the heathen temptation, found beans and squash at his door. It's a trick, he insisted at the emergency gathering. They're trying to buy us. With food? Martha Henley clutched her bundle like gold. Then I'm for sale. My boys ate their first full meal in a week. The argument started again, but weaker now. Hunger had a way of simplifying philosophy. Scarlett noticed how even those who spoke against accepting the gifts didn't offer to return them. Doc Henley, propped in his chair, raised a trembling hand. That bark. I tested it. It's willow, but prepared differently than I've seen. more potent. Young Thomas is already breathing easier. The devil can heal too, Walsh countered, to serve his purposes. Then the devil's doing more for us than Austin or Washington, someone called out. The meeting dissolved into the same circular debates, but Scarlett slipped out. She knew where to find him. Karuk sat by the failing well, drawing patterns in the dust. When she approached, he looked up without surprise. No strings, he said before she could ask. Children don't learn when hungry. Learn what? To live. He stood, gestured at the bundles she carried. That meat. Do you know what animal? She shook her head. Rabbit, but taken in deep summer when they're lean. Prepared wrong, it weakens instead of strengthens. Your people would hunt cattle, find none, starve with rabbits at their feet. He pointed to the cornmeal. Ground with limestone. Releases strength your body can't reach otherwise. Small things, life-saving things. Why not wait? Force us to accept your terms? Forced learning is shallow, dies with the teacher. He moved to the well, dropped another stone. The splash came quicker than yesterday. Besides, Standing Bear leads warriors, but his mother leads wisdom. She said feed them first, talk after. Hungry people make angry choices. His mother, eyes like rain, old as stone, twice as hard. She remembers when this land held different promises. Despite everything, Scarlett found herself curious. What promises? Room for all. Buffalo thick as your cattle once were. Water that ran clear and constant. His expression darkened. Then came promises on paper. Lines drawn by men who'd never walked here. Wars over words that meant different things to different tongues. Ancient history. Yesterday's weather. Today's drought. He shrugged. But dying over old anger feeds no one. So we try new ways. By teaching us? By learning together. You know things too, how to keep food through seasons, how to work metal, how to make marks that speak across distance. He traced a symbol in the dust. Fair trade, knowledge for knowledge. The sun climbed higher. In the distance, Scarlett could see women gathered at the well, their bucket hauling growing more desperate as the water level dropped. Show me, she said suddenly. This new well you spoke of. Show me how you know. Something shifted in his face. Surprise, maybe approval. Now? Now, before the council votes. Let them see proof, not just promises. He considered, then nodded. Bring your strongest digger, and rope, much rope. Within an hour, she'd gathered Jacob's nephew Samuel, still strong despite the lean months, and Tom Morrison, who dug wells before the drought made it pointless. Karuk led them to the spot he'd marked, then surprised them all by stripping to the waist and taking the first shift with the shovel. Always dig first, he said to their stares. Never ask others to labor where you won't. They worked in turns as the sun peaked. Karuk showed them how to angle the shaft, how to follow signs in the soil that meant water had passed this way before. When they hit rock, he didn't curse like the others, but examined it carefully. Good. Rock means channel. Water cuts deep, leaves road signs. By afternoon, half the town had gathered to watch. Some mocked, but when Karuk climbed out after his third shift, dirt-caked and sweating like any common laborer, the mockery faded. Even Reverend Walsh fell silent. Feel, Karuk said, pressing Samuel's hand to the rock face. Cool, damp. Water moves behind, seeking way through. How deep? Tom asked. By sunset, maybe. Tomorrow, certain. He accepted water from Scarlett, drank sparingly. But once found, this water stays, not like your straight well that drinks from surface pools. If you're wrong, Walsh had found his voice again, then I dig until right. Or die trying. He said it simply, like stating the weather. But Earth doesn't lie, only men do that. They dug. As shadows lengthened, more men joined. Even some who'd spoken against the alliance found themselves taking turns with shovels. There was something about shared labor that cut through politics. Near sunset, Samuel's shout brought everyone running. Water seeped through cracks in the rock, slow but steady. Not a flood, but enough. More than enough. Needs widening, Karuk said. But he was smiling. Stone channels to direct flow. Work for many days. But water is there. The crowd's mood shifted like wind changing direction. Scarlett heard murmurs of maybe replacing never. Saw mothers calculating how much farther their stores might stretch with reliable water. "This changes things," Martha said quietly. "It's just a well," Walsh protested, but his heart wasn't in it. "It's proof," Doc Henley corrected. "Proof they know what we don't. Proof they'll share it." He coughed, but softer than before. "That bark is working. First time in months I can breathe deep." As darkness fell, someone built a fire near the new well site. Others brought what food they could spare, including portions from the morning's gifts. Without planning or speeches, a meal took shape. Karuk sat at the edge of firelight, careful not to presume welcome. But when young Thomas Garrett, walking for the first time since his fever, brought him a plate, he accepted with grave courtesy. "My ma says thank you," the boy whispered. "For the medicine." "Thank the tree," Karuk replied, "and the grandmothers who taught its use." One by one, others approached. Questions at first: how to store the dried meat, what the seeds were for, how to prepare the bark. Practical things, survival things. Karuk answered patiently, sometimes demonstrating with his hands when words failed. "It's starting," Scarlett said, settling beside him with her own plate. "What is?" "Learning, like you said." She gestured at the mixed gathering. "Look at them. This morning, they were afraid. Now they're still afraid, but also curious. Curious keeps people alive longer than proud." They ate in companionable silence. Around them, the miracle of ordinary conversation, white and native, sharing food and firelight, bound by the universal need to see another dawn. "The vote's tomorrow," she said eventually. "Yes, it'll pass now, after this. Maybe. Wells are good. But old fear runs deeper than new water." She studied his profile in the firelight. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone more—" She gestured vaguely. "Savage, I suppose, like the stories." "Ah," he almost smiled. "You expected war paint and screaming. Scalps at my belt." Heat rose in her cheeks. "When you say it like that, it sounds foolish." "Not foolish. Stories have power. Your people tell stories of savage Indians. My people tell stories of broken treaties. Both true, both lies, both keeping us from seeing what's in front of us. Which is, drought doesn't care about stories. Winter doesn't check skin color." He stood, brushing dust from his pants. "Thank you. For the chance to dig. For the meal. You're leaving. Staying too long makes people nervous, but I'll return tomorrow, help widen the well, if permitted." She walked him to the edge of firelight. "Karuk, the gifts this morning. That was you, wasn't it? Not Standing Bear's orders." He tilted his head. "Standing Bear leads warriors, but sometimes war is fought with kindness." He vanished into darkness, leaving her with the strange feeling that she'd passed some sort of test. The fire burned low. Families drifted home, but the quiet conversations continued. For the first time in months, Scarlett heard something besides desperation in their voices. Hope, maybe. Or at least its possibility. Tomorrow they'd vote. Tonight they'd tasted what survival might look like. Not as conquered people or charity cases, but as students learning from teachers who knew the land's hard truths. The new well seeped steadily in the darkness, promising water for those willing to dig deep enough to find it. The dust cloud appeared at noon, just as the town gathered to cast their votes. Cavalry. 12 riders in faded blue, led by a man whose shoulder boards marked him as captain despite their tarnished state. They rode in hard, horses lathered with sweat, and formed a line across Main Street with practiced precision. "Nobody move." The captain's voice carried the authority of gunpowder and federal backing. "By order of the territorial administrator, this assembly is suspended pending investigation of unlawful congress with hostile natives." The voting box, her father's hat repurposed for democracy, sat on a barrel in front of the store. Half the town had already cast their stones, white for yes, black for no. Now they stood frozen, caught between hope and the hard reality of uniformed men with carbines. "Captain Hayes," Doc Henley knew him apparently. "We're conducting town business, nothing unlawful about it. That's for us to determine." Hayes dismounted, spurs jangling. Got reports of Indians making threats, demanding tribute. That true? No threats. Scarlett stepped forward. Just an offer of trade and teaching. Hayes focused on her, taking in the store dress, the ledger under her arm, the steadiness of her gaze. You'd be the Winters girl. Your father was a good man. Shame to see his daughter mixing with savages. Shame to see children starve when help's offered freely. His eyes narrowed. Freely? Indians don't give anything free, miss. There's always a price. The only price was learning to survive where civilization belongs. Hayes cut her off. This is American soil. We don't need savage charity. Then where's American charity? Martha Henley's voice cracked with desperation. Where's the supply wagons? Where's the help we were promised? War Department has priorities. Settling the frontier takes time. We don't have time. It was Samuel, dirt still under his nails from digging the new well. 8 days of water in the old well. Maybe. Then dig deeper. We did. Found rock. Dig elsewhere. Where? Scarlett's temper finally frayed. You want to point out these magical water sources? Want to explain how to make flour from dust? Or are you just here to stop us from saving ourselves? Hayes's hand moved to his sidearm. Not drawing, just reminding. Careful, Miss Winters. Seditious talk's a serious matter. The mounting tension shattered as horses appeared on the ridge. 20 riders, maybe more, moving with the fluid grace of men born to the saddle. They stopped just outside rifle range, waiting. Christ! One of Hayes's men muttered. How many? Standing Bear rode forward alone, stopping at the same careful distance Karuk always maintained. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the square. Captain Hayes, still playing soldier in empty towns. Standing Bear. Hayes' jaw tightened. This is federal business. Move along. Everything's federal business when you wear that coat. Doesn't make it right. Standing Bear's gaze swept the crowd. These people vote on their own future. No law against that. There's law against treating with hostiles. Hostile? Standing Bear laughed, rich and genuine. I offered food to starving people. If that's hostile, your dictionary needs work. You know what I mean. I know you have 12 men, tired horses, and orders from an office that can't find this place on a map. I have 20 warriors who know every stone for 50 miles. He leaned forward slightly. But more important, I have paper. From his vest, Standing Bear produced a document, unfolded it carefully. Treaty of Rock Springs, 18 months ago, signed by your Colonel Morrison, recognizes my authority over trade and movement in unclaimed territories. Red Mesa isn't unclaimed, isn't it? Where's your marshal? Your tax collector? Your federal courthouse? Standing Bear's smile held no warmth. You abandon these people, then complain when someone else offers help? Hayes's second-in-command leaned close, whispered urgently. Scarlett caught fragments. Outnumbered. No backup. Morrison won't thank us. The captain's face cycled through emotions. Anger, calculation, frustration. Finally, he made a show of checking his pocket watch. We'll make camp outside town. Observe this vote. Any sign of coercion, any hint these people are being forced, the only force here wears blue coats. Reverend Walsh spoke up, surprising everyone. Whatever my feelings about their offer, these are free Americans making free choices. The solidarity was unexpected but welcome. Hayes recognized the shift in mood, the dangerous ground he stood on. 12 men couldn't control a town that didn't want controlling, not with 20 warriors watching from the ridge. We'll be watching, he repeated. But the threat had lost its teeth. He remounted, led his men to the east side of the town where they could observe without interfering directly. Standing Bear waited until they'd cleared the square, then rode forward. This time, he dismounted. You should finish your vote, he said simply. Whatever you decide, decide it yourselves. Why help us? Scarlett found herself asking. The captain's not wrong. We haven't been friends to your people. No, you haven't. Standing Bear's weathered face showed every year of survival. But my nephew sees something in you worth saving. Karuk reads people like he reads water sign. Usually right. Your nephew? Did he not say? Standing Bear looked amused. Humble to a fault, that one. Could have claimed father's place as war chief. Chose to scout and teach instead. Said leading hunts taught more about leadership than leading warriors. The revelation reframed every interaction. Karuk wasn't just some hunter offering help. He was connected to power, had chosen a different path. The careful distance he maintained suddenly made more sense. A war chief's nephew couldn't appear to pressure or seduce. Changes things? Standing Bear studied her face. No. Maybe. I don't know. She felt the weight of too many eyes, too many judgments. We need to vote. Then vote. He mounted smoothly. But know this, that paper I showed. Real, but limited. Keeps soldiers from shooting, doesn't make them friends. Whatever you decide, decide for survival, not from fear of blue coats or red skin. He rode back to his warriors, leaving the town to its choice. The voting resumed, people stepping forward one by one to drop stones in the hat. White for accepting the alliance, black for refusing. Scarlet cast her white stone, felt its weight leave her fingers like letting go of her father's ghost. He'd built this store to serve the town. If the town needed new knowledge to survive, wasn't that service too? The cavalry watched from their camp, smoke from their fires rising straight in the still air. The warriors waited on the ridge, patient as the stones they sat among. Between them, Red Mesa chose its future one vote at a time. When the count came, it wasn't close. 38 white stones, 9 black. The ayes have it, Doc Henley announced. We accept the offer of alliance and education. Captain Hayes appeared immediately as expected. I'll need that in writing. Every man who voted yes signing their name. You're officially treating with Indians now. When this goes bad, and it will, you can't claim ignorance. Give us paper, Scarlet said. We'll sign. They did, all 38, while Hayes made his own record. When it was done, he mounted up, gathered his men. This isn't over, he promised. Colonel Morrison will hear about this. The territorial administrator, maybe even Washington. Let them come, Martha Henley called out. Maybe they'll bring the food and medicine they promised. Hayes led his patrol east, probably to file reports that would sit unread in some distant office. The warriors melted back into the landscape, their point made, and Red Mesa stood in the afternoon sun, committed now to a path that led through unknown territory. Not just the physical trails Karuk would teach them, but the harder journey of setting aside old stories for new survival. What now? Someone asked. Now we dig wells, Scarlet said. Store water, learn what they'll teach, live to argue about it later. The crowd dispersed slowly. Some headed to the new well to continue working. Others went home to explain to children why they'd be learning new words, new ways. A few stood in clusters, already regretting their votes, but too proud to admit it. Change had come to Red Mesa, not with guns or glory, but with desperation and the simple mathematics of survival. 8 days of water had become a future measured in seasons, if they could swallow their pride long enough to learn. The hat that had held their votes sat empty on the barrel, waiting to be a hat again, but it had served its purpose, carrying the weight of decision, the stones of democracy. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The church bell rang at dawn, calling the town to its reckoning. They gathered in the small sanctuary, but this wasn't about prayer. The pine boards that had heard sermons now witnessed democracy in its rawest form, neighbor facing neighbor, choosing who would stay and who would go. Everyone over 16 gets a vote, Doc Henley announced from the pulpit, looking stronger after a week of willow bark treatment. Man or woman doesn't matter. This choice touches all. Reverend Walsh stood in the corner, his face a map of displeasure. He'd already announced his intention to leave with the morning supply train, if it came. 5 others had done the same, unwilling to live under what Walsh called heathen influence. Let's be clear, Scarlet addressed the crowd from beside Doc Henley. Staying means accepting the full agreement, learning their language, at least basics, sharing labor, training together for defense. No half measures. And our faith, Mrs. Patterson clutched her worn Bible. Yours to keep, Karuk spoke from the back, having arrived silently as always. We don't ask you to pray to our spirits, only to respect them as we respect your God. Respect, Walsh spat the word. You want us to respect paganism? I want you to respect survival, Karuk replied evenly. Your Christ fasted 40 days in wilderness. Did the stones he walked on care about his faith? The voting began. One by one, they filed to the front, dropping river stones into 2 baskets, smooth white for staying, rough black for leaving. Scarlett watched faces as they chose, seeing fear and hope and resignation in equal measure. Young Daniel Morrison voted to stay, defying his uncle who'd already packed. The widow Clark, 73, and stubborn as mesquite, dropped her white stone with a dare-you-to-argue glare. Even some who'd voted against the alliance chose to remain, unwilling to abandon homes despite their doubts. When the count finished, 32 staying, 15 leaving. "So be it," Doc Henley said. "Those departing have until noon to gather belongings. We'll help load wagons." "Help?" Walsh's voice cracked. "You're casting us out and offering help?" "Nobody's casting," Scarlett said firmly. "You're choosing. We're respecting that choice, same as you should respect ours." The leaving began immediately. Families who'd shared Sunday dinners now divided possessions in careful silence. The general store's meager supplies were split fairly. Those departing got trail provisions. Those staying kept seeds and tools. Scarlett found herself mediating disputes over things that seemed foolish against the backdrop of survival. Who owned the cake pan? Whether the shared plow belonged to the family using it or the one who'd repaired it. But she understood. When everything else was uncertain, people clung to small certainties. "My grandmother's quilt stays," Mrs. Morrison declared, though she was leaving. "Then take it," Martha Henley said quietly. "But remember it warm when your pride keeps you cold." By mid-morning, 2 wagons sat loaded in the street. The cavalry had promised escort to Fort Bradshaw, 3 days east. Captain Hayes watched from horseback, satisfaction playing at his mouth's corners as families climbed aboard. "You're making a mistake," he told those remaining. "But it's your mistake to make. When the savages show their true nature, Scarlett interrupted, has been feeding our children while you sent excuses." Karuk appeared at her shoulder. When had he moved? And added quietly, "Captain forgets. We know true nature of cavalry too. Sand Creek, Washita River, perhaps everyone should fear true natures." Hayes's hand twitched toward his sidearm but stopped. Too many witnesses, too many of Standing Bear's warriors visible on the ridges. Instead, he wheeled his mount, barked orders. The small convoy began rolling. The parting was harder than expected. Children who'd played together waved goodbye, not understanding the permanence. Adults who'd survived drought and hardship together now separated over philosophy and fear. "Go with God," someone called. "Stay with devils," Walsh shot back, but his heart wasn't in the insult. Scarlett noticed who didn't leave, all the young families with children, most of the skilled workers, everyone who'd drunk from the new well. Fear of change had lost to fear of death. Sarah, old Sarah Miller, stood beside her wagon, tears cutting channels through dust on her cheeks. "I'm too old, can't learn new ways." "Then learn slow," Karuk said gently. "Wisdom has no age limit." But she climbed aboard anyway, choosing the familiar over the foreign. Her nephew helped her up, his own face torn between duty and desire to stay. The last surprise came from an unexpected source. Private Collins, youngest of Hayes's patrol, suddenly dismounted and removed his uniform jacket. "What are you doing, soldier?" Hayes roared. "Choosing, sir." Collins stood straight despite his shaking hands. "Requesting discharge on grounds of conscience." "Desertion, you mean?" "No, sir. Completion of enlistment in 3 days. I'm informing you of my intention not to re-enlist." The young man swallowed hard. "My family died in the Kansas drought. If these people found water where the Corps of Engineers couldn't—" He trailed off, the implication clear. "You'll be branded a traitor." "By who? The department that sends no supplies? The government that promises protection then disappears?" Collins laid his jacket across his saddle. "I'll take my chances with people who keep their word." Hayes looked ready to shoot the boy himself, but legal enlistment terms were sacred, even here. 3 days. You stand watch 3 more days. Then you can rot with the rest of them." "Yes, sir." The convoy rolled east, dust rising like a funeral shroud. Those remaining watched until wagons became specks. Then nothing. 15 fewer mouths to feed, but also 15 fewer backs to share the work. "Well," Doc Henley broke the silence, "best get started on what comes next." What came next was learning. Karuk had brought others, a woman named Singing Crow who knew plants, an elder called Bent Tree, who could read weather in cloud shapes most couldn't even see. They started simple. Which cacti held water, how to prepare mesquite beans to unlock their nutrition, where to dig for root vegetables that survive drought. "Your ways aren't wrong," Singing Crow explained to the women gathered in the church. "Just incomplete. You know preservation, but not adaptation." She demonstrated how to make pemmican, dried meat pounded with fat and berries, dense enough to sustain a person for days. How to recognize edible plants they'd walked past unknowing. How certain insects predicted rain, how others warned of flash floods. Outside, Karuk worked with the men on water collection. Not just wells, but ceramic-lined catchments for rare rain, underground storage that stayed cool, channels to direct precious runoff. "Every drop is life," he said, showing them how to read land for natural collection points. "Waste nothing." Young Thomas Garrett, fully recovered now, followed Karuk like a shadow, absorbing everything. Other children did the same, picking up words in the native tongue faster than their parents. "Good," Standing Bear observed on one of his visits. "Children learn without prejudice. They'll be the bridge." The work was hard. Calloused hands split and bled learning new tools. Backs ached from different labors. Pride stung when native teachers corrected mistakes with patient repetition. But the new well ran steady. The catchments began filling with morning dew. The store's shelves held strange but nutritious foods. When Private Collins finished his enlistment, he burned his uniform and asked for work. They gave him a shovel and a teacher. Within days, he was digging alongside Samuel Morrison, learning to feel the earth's hints about water. Not everyone adjusted smoothly. Arguments broke out over resources, over methods, over whether women should learn warrior skills alongside domestic ones. But Scarlett noticed something. The arguments were about how to survive, not whether to try. "Progress," Karuk said one evening, sitting beside her on the store's steps as the sun died. They'd developed this habit, a few minutes of quiet conversation as the day ended. "Slow progress," she corrected. "The only kind that lasts." He gestured at the town, where white and native worked side by side in the fading light. "Your father would be proud." Would he? His daughter, treating with Indians. His daughter, saving his town. Methods matter less than results. She studied his profile, this man who could have claimed power but chose teaching instead. Standing Bear said you could have been war chief. Could have been many things. Chose to be useful. He smiled slightly. War chiefs are needed, but water finders, seed keepers, bridge builders. These save more lives than any warrior. Is that what you are? A bridge builder? Trying to be. Same as you. He stood, that careful distance still maintained despite growing familiarity. Tomorrow we start defense training. Your people need to know both worlds' dangers. And if those dangers include your own people, other bands who don't accept this? His expression hardened. Then we face that together. That's what alliance means. Shared enemies along with shared water. He vanished into darkness, leaving her with questions and something else. A warmth that had nothing to do with the desert heat. But this was no time for such feelings. Too much depended on clear heads and steady hands. Inside the store, she lit the lantern and looked at the ledger. New entries now. Strange seeds traded for cloth, native medicine for ammunition, knowledge for goods. The red ink was fading, replaced by a different kind of accounting. Survival measured one adapted day at a time. The transformation took root like desert flowers after rain, slow at first, then with surprising vigor. 3 months in, Red Mesa barely resembled the dying town it had been. The new well ran steady and deep, feeding a network of channels that directed precious water to ceramic-lined storage pools. Gardens sprouted where dust had ruled, growing unfamiliar vegetables that thrived in heat and needed little moisture. Scarlett stood in the improved store, checking inventory that would have seemed impossible before. Dried beans in varieties she was still learning to name. Medicinal herbs bundled and labeled in 2 languages. Smoked meats prepared in ways that kept for months without spoiling. The ledger showed black ink now, not wealth, but sustainability. "Morning lesson," Singing Crow announced from the doorway. A dozen children trailing behind her like ducklings. They chattered in a mixture of English and the native tongue, sliding between languages with the ease of youth. "Morning, Mrs. Crow," they chorused. though she'd told them repeatedly that Singing Crow was her full name, not divisible by white customs. Today's lesson was practical, identifying edible plants in the field, learning the seasons of availability, understanding which parts to harvest without killing the source. The children scattered under her watchful eye, filling baskets with knowledge as much as food. Outside, different education unfolded. Karuk supervised as men and women alike learned to read tracks, understand animal behavior, move quietly across broken ground. Private Collins, just Will now, had proven particularly adept, his military training adapting well to frontier scouting. Coyote, young Thomas Garrett announced proudly, pointing at marks in the dust. 2 days old, heading for water. Good eye, but how do you know 2 days? The boy studied harder, remembering lessons about how wind and time changed sign. Edges are soft but not gone, and the scat nearby is dry but not white yet. Better, always confirm with multiple signs. Karuk's approval made the boy beam. Now, who sees what else passed here? Scarlett watched from the store porch, a familiar warmth spreading through her chest. These small victories, children learning, adults adapting, the town breathing again, felt more significant than any fortune her father might have dreamed of building. Admiring the view? Doc Henley's voice startled her. He moved quietly now, the consumption controlled though not cured by native medicines. Admiring the progress. He settled beside her, joints creaking. Martha asked me to speak with you. About the fact that you and our friend Karuk circle each other like wary cats, maintaining careful distance when everyone can see you'd rather not. Heat flooded her face. That's not... We have responsibilities. Yes, you do, which is why I'm speaking plainly. His eyes were kind but direct. This alliance works because of trust built between leaders. Personal connection strengthens that trust. Or compromises it. What happens if... She stopped, unable to voice the possibilities. What happens if you're human, if you find happiness in hard times? Doc Henley patted her shoulder. Your father wanted you safe and successful. Wouldn't he also want you happy? Before she could respond, commotion erupted near the well. Riders approaching, not cavalry or warriors, but a trading party. 3 wagons heavy with goods, accompanied by hard-faced men who knew the dangers of open country. The lead trader, a weather-beaten man named Josiah Hartley, swung down from his wagon with obvious surprise. Well, I'll be damned. Heard Red Mesa was a ghost town. Was. Scarlett met him halfway. Things change. So I see. His shrewd eyes took in the improvements. The mixed population working together, the healthy children. Also heard you'd gone native. We've gone practical. You trading or judging? He laughed, a bark of genuine amusement. Trading always, though I'll admit, didn't expect to find customers. He gestured to his wagon. Got coffee, sugar, ammunition, cloth. What you got to trade? This was the test. For 3 months they'd been building internal sustainability, but connection to wider markets mattered too. Scarlett led him to the store, showed him their goods. His expression shifted from skepticism to interest. This pemmican, how long's it keep? 6 months minimum, longer in cool storage. And these medicines? Singing Crow appeared, explained preparations and uses. Within an hour, serious negotiation was underway. By evening, the wagons were lighter and Red Mesa had coffee for the first time in months. You've done something here, Hartley admitted over dinner. Other towns are dying or fled. You're thriving. We're surviving, Scarlett corrected. Thriving comes later. Maybe, but survival's more than most manage. He glanced around at the mixed gathering, natives and whites sharing food and conversation. This sort of thing spreads, you know. Word travels, other towns might want to learn. Let them come, Standing Bear spoke from across the fire. The principles are simple. The practice is hard. Many will try, few will persist. Later, as the traders bedded down and the town settled into evening routines, Scarlett found herself walking the perimeter with Karuk. It had become a habit, checking defenses, discussing tomorrow's work, stealing moments of companionship. Hartley's right, Karuk said. Word will spread. Some will come to learn, others... He didn't finish, but she understood. Success bred resentment as surely as failure bred desperation. We'll handle it? We. He smiled at the word. Yes, we will. They'd reached the cottonwood grove where young couples traditionally courted. Without discussion, they stopped walking. The careful distance remained, but barely. Doc Henley spoke to me, she said quietly. Martha spoke to me. His voice carried amusement. They conspire. Karuk. She struggled for words. This thing between us is noticed by everyone but acknowledged by none. He turned to face her fully. I've maintained distance out of respect. For you, for the Alliance, for your father's memory. But perhaps distance serves no one now. And if it goes wrong, then we face that honestly, as we've faced everything else. He stepped closer, finally breaching that careful space. But Scarlett, what if it goes right? The question hung between them like a promise. She thought of her father, of propriety, of all the reasons this was complicated. Then she thought of Doc Henley's words, of happiness in hard times, of the way Karuk's presence had become as essential as water. The stars are beautiful tonight, she said, instead of answering directly. Yes, he agreed, though he wasn't looking up. Very beautiful. They stood there, shoulders almost touching, watching stars wheel overhead, while the town slept peacefully around them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more refugees seeking help, traders carrying word of their success, perhaps opposition from those who saw their alliance as betrayal. But tonight, there was this. Two people finding each other across a gulf of culture and custom, building something personal alongside something communal. When she finally returned to her quarters above the store, Scarlett felt the shift inside herself. Not abandonment of her father's legacy, but expansion of it. He'd built a store to serve a community. She was building a community worth serving. The next morning brought expected complications. Two families from the failed settlement at Dry Creek arrived, desperate and skeptical in equal measure. A letter from the territorial administrator warning against unauthorized fraternization. A dispute over water rights between old residents and new arrivals. But also, children playing games that mixed both cultures, women comparing notes on preservation techniques, men working together to expand the catchment system. Will Collins and Thomas Garrett returning from a scout with news of a buffalo herd moving through territory that hadn't seen them in years. The land remembers, Bentry observed, watching dust rise from the approaching herd. When people learn to live with it instead of against it, it welcomes them back. Standing Bear organized a hunt, not the wholesale slaughter the army practiced, but selective taking of what they needed. White and native hunters rode together, learned together, celebrated together when they succeeded. That night, as fresh meat roasted and people sang songs in 2 languages, Scarlett stood in her store and marveled at the transformation. Not just of the town, but of possibility itself. Karuk appeared at her elbow, no longer maintaining that careful distance. Your thoughts? Thinking about bridges, she said. How they're built one stone at a time. And about bridge builders. She smiled, leaning slightly into his warmth. Thinking about them, too. Outside, Red Mesa celebrated survival turned to hope. Inside, 2 people who'd found each other in the midst of transformation stood together, building something that might last longer than drought or plenty, something that drew strength from difference rather than despite it. The ledger on the counter showed more than black ink now. It showed a future written in the language of adaptation, measured in lessons learned and connections made. 1 stone at a time, the bridge grew stronger. The first drops fell at dawn, gentle as whispered promises. Scarlett woke to the sound, so foreign after months of drought that she initially mistook it for wind. Then the rhythm registered, rain on the new tin roof they'd installed over the store, a luxury made possible by successful trading. She dressed quickly and stepped onto the porch to find half the town already gathered. Faces turned skyward in wonder. Children who'd never seen real rain danced in the dusty street as drops multiplied, dust becoming mud, then flowing water. The catchments, someone shouted, and men scrambled to check the collection systems they'd built but never properly tested. Water flowed into ceramic-lined pools, every drop precious, every gallon a victory against future drought. Karuk appeared beside her, hair already damp. The land celebrates. We all do. She couldn't stop smiling as children splashed in rapidly forming puddles as adults hurried to position every available container. How long will it last? Bent Tree says 2 days, maybe 3, enough to fill our stores if we're smart. They were smart. 3 months of learning had taught them to waste nothing. Women organized bucket brigades while men reinforced channels and checked dam walls. Everyone worked with practiced efficiency, native and white knowledge blending seamlessly. Look at them, Doc Henley marveled, standing under the clinic's overhang. Like they've been doing this together for years. It was true. The desperate coalition of summer had become something more. A genuine community built on shared knowledge and mutual respect. Even the newest arrivals, 2 families who'd fled failed homesteads, worked alongside everyone else. By noon, the gentle rain had become a steady downpour. The main reservoir was half full, the secondary catchments flowing nicely. But with rain came unexpected visitors. "Riders coming," Will Collins called from his watch post. "Cavalry patrol. No, wait, that's not cavalry." The approaching group wore mixed uniforms and civilian clothes. Deserters maybe, or discharged soldiers turned drifters. 8 men, armed and wary, stopping just outside the effective rifle range. "That's close enough." Standing Bear emerged from cover, warriors flanking him. The old patterns kicked in immediately, defenders taking positions with smooth coordination. "Easy there," the lead rider called. "We're not here for trouble. Name's Sergeant Walsh, formerly Sergeant. Heard there was a town here that figured things out, place where a man could start over." Scarlett studied him from the doorway. Mid-30s, cavalry bearing but no insignia, men who looked tired rather than threatening. Still, 8 armed strangers required caution. "What kind of starting over?" she called. "The kind where past stops mattering and future starts counting." Walsh dismounted slowly, hands visible. "We've all got histories. Some of us served at places we're not proud of, made choices that haunt us. Heard Red Mesa judges folks by what they do now, not what they did then." "You heard partially right," Karuk stepped forward. "We judge by willingness to learn and contribute. Past matters if it threatens present." "Fair enough." Walsh looked at his men, seemed to come to a decision. "Cards on the table. 3 of us rode with the 7th before Washita, couldn't stomach it after. Others got discharged for refusing orders against civilians. We're not angels, but we're done with that kind of soldiering." The admission hung heavy. Washita River, even speaking the name brought tension. Standing Bear's expression hardened, several warriors shifting grips on weapons. "You rode with Custer." Standing Bear's voice could have frozen the falling rain. "Rode away from him," Walsh corrected. "Soon as we could. Would have done it sooner if we'd had the courage." "Courage comes when it comes," Karuk said quietly. "Question is, what comes next?" What came next was careful negotiation. The men were allowed to make camp outside town, under watch. Over the following days, they proved themselves useful. Military training adapted well to frontier defense, and several had skills the town needed. One was a surveyor, another had medical training, a third knew telegraph operation. "They're trying," Martha observed, watching Walsh help reinforce a dam. "And Lord knows we need the hands." The integration wasn't smooth. Old wounds ran deep on both sides. But necessity and Karuk's patient mediation gradually built bridges. When one of Walsh's men fell ill, Singing Crow treated him without hesitation. When raiders from a hostile band threatened the horse herd, the former soldiers stood defense alongside everyone else. "Redemption's a funny thing," Walsh said one evening, sharing watch duty with Scarlett. "Spent years following orders I knew were wrong. Now I'm learning from people I was taught to fight. Makes a man think. About how much we lose to pride and fear, how much we could gain by setting them aside." He gestured at the town, where lamplight showed mixed groups working, talking, living. "This shouldn't work. Everything I was taught says it's impossible." Maybe you were taught wrong. Maybe I was. The rain had long since passed, but its effects lingered. Full reservoirs, green shoots in the gardens, and something else. A sense of possibility that drew people like flowers draw bees. 2 more trading caravans arrived, word spreading of Red Mesa's resurrection. A traveling preacher expecting to condemn heathen collaboration, Instead, found himself welcomed and invited to hold services alongside native ceremonies. "We're becoming something new," Karuk said one evening. He and Scarlett sat on the store's porch, no longer maintaining any pretense of distance. Not White Town or native camp, something between. Something better? Something necessary. He took her hand, a simple gesture that would have scandalized her months ago. Now it felt as natural as breathing. "Your father built in straight lines. We build in curves. Both have strength." She thought about that, about adaptation and tradition, about the ways love could grow in unlikely soil. Around them, Red Mesa hummed with life. Children played games that mixed cultures as easily as languages. Adults shared meals and knowledge, building trust one interaction at a time. "The territorial government won't like it," she said. "Colonel Morrison, the administrators, they'll see this as a threat." "Let them come," Standing Bear had joined them, as he often did for evening discussions. "We follow every law, pay every tax. We simply choose our own path between the rules. And if they make new rules, then we adapt again. Like water finding its way through stone." Private Collins, Will, approached with evening reports. The young man had flourished, finding purpose in protecting something worth protecting. "All quiet on the perimeter. Oh, and Mrs. Patterson wanted me to tell you. She's finished the first bilingual primer. Children can start learning letters in both languages." Another small victory. Another stone in the bridge they were building. As night settled over Red Mesa, Scarlett made her final rounds. The store was well stocked, mixing traditional goods with native crafts that traders increasingly sought. The clinic held medicines both modern and ancient. The schoolroom waited for tomorrow's lessons in survival and cooperation. She paused at her father's photograph, still hanging behind the counter. "I hope you'd understand," she whispered. "I'm keeping your store alive, just differently than you imagined." Outside, a coyote called from the hills. Once, that sound would have meant danger. Now it was simply part of the desert's night song, no more threatening than the wind. Karuk waited by the door, patient as always. "Ready? For whatever comes next." She took his offered hand, stepping into a future that bore no resemblance to what she'd planned. Her father's store had become a trading post between worlds. His daughter had become a bridge between peoples. The dying town had become a living experiment in what was possible when survival mattered more than separation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Word of their success was spreading, drawing both those who wanted to learn and those who wanted to stop them. The railroad was coming, bringing its own complications. Other bands, other towns, other interests would all have opinions about what Red Mesa represented. But tonight, there was rain-fed plenty and hard-won peace. Tonight, former enemies shared food and former strangers shared hearts. Tonight, children slept safely in a town that had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes, the only way to preserve what matters is to let it change. Standing on the porch with Karuk beside her, watching their transformed town settle into sleep, Scarlett remembered that first desperate laugh when he'd made his offer. Now she understood what he'd meant that day. Winter remembers every laugh of pride, but spring? Spring remembers those brave enough to bend instead of break, to learn instead of languish, to build bridges where others saw only divisions. Red Mesa lived, different than before, stronger than before, ready for whatever seasons lay ahead. And in the general store that anchored it all, the ledgers showed more than profit. They showed proof that survival was sweetest when shared. Thank you for listening to this story. I'm curious, where are you listening from? Please share your location in the comments so we can connect across distances, just like the folks in Red Mesa learned to do. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Scarlett and Karuk's journey. What bridges are you building in your own life?